All right, before we get into anything, I want you to do something for me. Close your eyes for just a second and imagine this. You've worked hard, you've saved money, you've gone through the insanity of buying a house, the inspections, the paperwork, the closing costs, all of it. And finally, you have a place that is yours, a home you own, land with your name on the deed. You can paint the front door whatever color you want. You can plant a garden. You can park your car in your own driveway. It feels incredible. It feels like freedom. Now imagine that within 72 hours of moving in, a stranger walks up to your front door, knocks, and hands you a printed document with the words "Violation Notice" at the top. Not because you did anything dangerous, not because you hurt anyone, but because your welcome mat is the wrong shade of beige. Welcome to life in an HOA neighborhood. For those who don't know, HOA stands for Homeowners Association. And the idea, in theory, is fine. Keep the neighborhood looking nice. Maintain shared spaces. Create a little community cohesion. Sure, great, love it. But somewhere between that idea and reality, the HOA Karen was born. The HOA Karen is a very specific type of person. She, and occasionally he, has discovered that by sitting on a volunteer neighborhood board, they now have a small, measurable amount of power over other human beings. And that power, it does something to them. They become obsessed. They patrol. They photograph. They file reports. They show up uninvited. They send certified letters. They call emergency board meetings about the height of your hedges. They have found their calling. And their calling is making your life miserable. Today, we are reading the most unhinged, the most infuriating, and honestly, the most deeply satisfying HOA Karen stories ever submitted by real homeowners from all across this country. These are real people, real neighborhoods, real situations that actually happened. Every single story ends with the homeowner fighting back. Because that's the only kind of story I want to tell you. 7 chapters, 7 Karens, 7 absolute disasters. So grab whatever you're drinking, get comfortable. Silence your phone, although honestly, if your HOA Karen is texting you right now, maybe keep it on. And whatever you do, do not let her see you watching this. Let's get into it. Our first story comes from a man I'm going to call Dave because that's his name, and Dave does not care if you know it. Dave is 64 years old. He spent 30 years as a firefighter. He ran into burning buildings for 3 decades. He carried people out of collapsing structures. He did all of that without flinching once. Suburban Ohio neighborhood, he thought the hardest part of his life was behind him. He was not prepared for Karen. Karen was the self-appointed HOA president of their small neighborhood. She had been president for 6 consecutive years. Nobody ran against her because nobody else wanted the job, which, as we'll see, is exactly how these situations happen. Karen was known for 3 things: her color-coded violation binders, her habit of standing at her window with binoculars, actual binoculars, watching the street, and her complete and total inability to mind her own business. Dave had been in his home for about 6 weeks when it happened. A Tuesday morning. He's having his coffee. He goes out to grab the newspaper from his porch and finds, taped to his front door, not mailed, not emailed, physically taped, a formal HOA violation notice. The violation? His lawn grass was in excess of the approved height limit. The approved limit was 3.5 inches. Dave's grass had been measured, and I want you to really hear this, at 3.8 inches. 3.8 inches. That is 3/10 of an inch. That is less than the width of a pencil. Dave, being a reasonable man, assumed this was either a mistake or a joke. He looked up the violation process in the HOA documents, confirmed that yes, 3.5 inches is genuinely in the rulebook, and paid the $75 fine because it wasn't worth his time. But then he started asking around, and his neighbor Mike, who'd lived there for 11 years, told him something important. Karen hadn't just filed the report. Karen had personally come to Dave's yard that morning with a ruler and measured it herself at 6 a.m. before Dave was even awake, in her bathrobe, on his property. Now Dave is interested. He goes and gets a copy of the full HOA rulebook, all 47 pages of it, and he reads it, cover to cover, front to back, the way only a retired man with time on his hands and a score to settle can read something. And what Dave finds is very, very interesting. Section 4, paragraph 11. Decorative landscaping borders must be maintained within approved property boundary lines. Maximum protrusion beyond property edge, 0 inches. Dave walks across the street. He looks at Karen's front yard. She has this decorative rock border around her flower beds. Beautiful, really. And Dave gets down on one knee right there in the street, and he measures. And what Dave finds is very, very interesting. Section 4, paragraph 11. Decorative landscaping borders must be maintained within approved property boundary lines. Maximum PS those rocks? 2 inches outside the approved property line. Dave goes home. He gets his camera. He photographs every single rock from multiple angles. He notes the time stamps. He cross-references the exact section number in the rulebook. He fills out the official HOA violation complaint form. Which, fun fact, he had to request from Karen herself, who was the under-president and therefore the person who processed all complaints. He mailed it, certified, return receipt requested. Karen had no choice but to process it, because the rules that gave her power over everyone else applied to her too. She was fined $400, because this was technically her third violation of that section over the years, and the fine scale went up with each offense. Pause. Let it land. Dave didn't stop there. Over the next 3 months, Dave conducted what can only be described as a forensic audit of Karen's property. He found and formally reported 6 additional violations. By spring, Karen had been fined a total of $1,100. She tried to dispute the complaints. The board, which she ran, was forced to vote on whether to uphold them. They upheld every single one. Karen stopped measuring people's grass. And Dave? He framed the first fine receipt, hung it in his garage right next to his retirement plaque from the fire department. He calls the frame the trophy. He shows it to every person who visits. He told the person who submitted this story that it was the most satisfying thing he had done since putting out a 4-alarm warehouse fire in 2019. I believe him. For our second story, we're going to Phoenix, Arizona, where a woman named Sandra learned a very important lesson about buying a home in an HOA neighborhood. The lesson is, read every single word of the HOA documents before you sign anything. Every single word. Sandra did not do this, and in her defense, the HOA documents were 94 pages long and written in a font so small she needed reading glasses she didn't own yet. Revenge scene. Sandra was 31 years old, newly promoted at her job, and had just bought her first home. She was thrilled. She had a new house. She had a new job. She had a brand new pickup truck she'd bought to celebrate. A beautiful silver F-150 sitting proudly in her driveway. She had been in the house for 48 hours when Linda showed up. Linda was not the HOA president. Linda was not the HOA vice president. Linda was the HOA compliance coordinator, a title that, as far as anyone could determine, Linda had invented for herself and added to the organization website one evening without telling the board. Linda knocked on Sandra's door at 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning, introduced herself with a business card, a real printed business card with her HOA title on it, and informed Sandra that her vehicle was in violation. The truck, Linda explained, was 4 inches longer than the maximum allowed vehicle length for residential driveway parking. She knew this because she had a measuring tape on her person at all times. Sandra, completely bewildered, asked where exactly this rule was written. Linda did not refer her to the HOA documents. Linda produced a laminated reference card, credit card sized, kept in her wallet, that summarized what she considered the top 10 most violated HOA rules. Vehicle length was number 3. Sandra moved the truck into her garage. Problem solved, she figured. The following Saturday, another knock. This time, the garage door. It had been open while Sandra was unloading groceries. Linda had walked by, looked inside, and determined that the visible contents of the garage violated the neighborhood aesthetic standards specifically. A section about not displaying commercial equipment. Sandra had a shop vac. That was apparently the issue. The rule stated garage doors must remain closed when not in active use to preserve neighborhood visual uniformity. The Saturday after that, a violation notice in her mailbox. Her outdoor trash can had been visible from the street between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. on trash pickup day. The rule required trash cans to be stored out of street view at all times except within a 1-hour window of pickup. At this point, Sandra had lived in her house for 3 weeks and had already been fined $275. Sandra called a real estate attorney friend from college. "Just a vent," she said. But the attorney got curious and asked to see the HOAS documentation. The attorney looked things over and then asked Sandra one question. "Has this HOA filed their annual registration with the state this year?" Sandra didn't know. The attorney looked it up, then looked up the previous year, then the year before that. Here it comes! The HOA had not filed their required annual documents with the Arizona Corporation Commission in 3 consecutive years. Under Arizona law, a homeowners association that fails to maintain its registered status loses its legal authority to enforce its CC and RS, its covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Technically, legally, the HOA had no enforceable authority over anything. Every fine they had issued during that period was legally void. Sandra's attorney sent a formal letter. The HOA panicked. They hired their own lawyer. Their lawyer confirmed the problem was real. Sandra got back every fine she had paid, with interest. The HOA had to pay her attorney's fees. Linda was quietly removed from her invented compliance coordinator role. The HOA spent the next 4 months doing emergency paperwork to get their registration reinstated. During that entire period, they were legally prohibited from issuing any fines or enforcement actions to anyone. Sandra still has the F-150. It is still 4 inches too long. It sits in her driveway every single day. Linda has not knocked on her door since. I want to take a moment before this story to acknowledge something. The holidays are supposed to be a time of joy, of warmth, of connection. The Patterson family understood this deeply. They were the kind of people who started getting excited about Christmas in October. The kind of family where decorating the house was a whole event. The kids got to hang lights. There was hot chocolate involved. Somebody invariably fell off a step stool, and it became a family story forever. They had been doing this for years, same neighborhood, same house, same decorations, lights along the roofline, a wreath on the door, a wooden nativity scene in the front yard that their grandfather had hand-carved. Nobody had ever complained. Most neighbors loved it. And then Deborah moved in 2 houses down. Deborah was retired, recently divorced, and had apparently decided that the HOA board was the appropriate place to redirect her energy. She ran for treasurer, then secretary, then vice president. She had been on the board for 14 months when the Pattersons' first Christmas in her era arrived. The HOA rulebook said holiday decorations were permitted between December 1st and January 7th. That was it. No restrictions on type, size, or quantity, just the date window. The Pattersons put up their decorations on November 29th. 2 days before the window opened. They had done this every year for as long as anyone could remember. It had never been an issue. Deborah filed a formal complaint the same day, November 29th, and sent the Pattersons a cease and desist letter via email. The letter included the phrase visually aggressive light display, which, for a string of white LED lights and a wooden nativity scene, is genuinely one of the most dramatic descriptions I have ever read. The Pattersons, understandably confused, left the decorations up. The window opened on December 1st, making them technically compliant. They assumed that would end it. It did not end it. At midnight on December 1st, midnight, the literal stroke of midnight, Deborah walked to the Pattersons' house to personally verify whether the decorations were still up past what she had decided was the November 29th violation window. They were, because it was December 1st and they were allowed to be. Deborah photographed them. She filed a supplemental complaint documenting the 2-day pre-window display. The HOA board, which she sat on, voted to fine the Pattersons $150. The Pattersons requested a hearing at the next neighborhood meeting. They came prepared. Mrs. Patterson stood up, thanked everyone for their time, and then presented a printed packet she had prepared. In the packet were photographs, time-stamped, dated, of Deborah's own front porch. Specifically, a decorative seasonal flag on Deborah's porch. The flag had an autumn leaves design. It had been up since mid-September. It was still up on December 1st. The same rulebook section that covered holiday decorations also covered decorative flags and banners. The approved display period for all decorative outdoor items was, you already know, December 1st through January 7th. Deborah's flag had been up for 11 weeks in violation of the same rule she had used to fine the Pattersons the moment, Deborah said. And this is a direct quote from the meeting minutes. Flags are a different category of decoration and should be evaluated separately. She was the only person in the room who believed this. The board voted. The Pattersons' fine was reversed unanimously. Deborah was given 14 days to remove the flag or face daily fines under the same section she had cited against the Pattersons. Deborah removed herself from the HOA board 3 days later, citing personal reasons. She has not attended a board meeting since. The Pattersons put their decorations up again this year on November 29th. Nobody said anything, because there was nobody left to say anything. The grandfather's nativity scene is still in the front yard. Still hand-carved, still the most beautiful thing on the block. I need you to understand something about Marcus before we get into this story. Marcus is, by all accounts, one of the most patient people you will ever meet. His wife describes him as annoyingly calm. His coworkers call him the reasonable one. He is the person who, in an argument, will stop and say, "Okay, let's all just take a breath here." I tell you this because what happened to Marcus would have made a less patient person absolutely lose their mind. Marcus and his wife had 2 young kids, 7 and 4 years old. They had a big, open backyard, but no fence, which meant the kids couldn't play outside unsupervised. Marcus wanted to change that. He did everything right. He looked up the HOA rules on fencing. He found the approved dimensions, materials, and color options. He chose a simple wooden fence, 6 feet tall, stained in the approved neutral tone. He submitted the HOA application for approval, including a plot diagram showing the exact placement. He waited the required 30-day review period. He received a formal written approval letter signed by the HOA board chair. Then he hired a licensed contractor. The fence went up over 3 days. On day 3, while the contractor was finishing the final section, a woman appeared on the other side of the property line. This was Pam. Pam was not on the HOA board. Pam did not hold any official position. Pam was simply a neighbor who had decided, apparently that morning, that the fence was not perfectly parallel to the property line. She had looked at it. She had eyeballed it. And she believed, based purely on her personal visual assessment, that one end of the fence was off by about 2 degrees. She reported this to the HOA board. The board took it seriously, which is the first mistake. They sent an inspector. The inspector measured. And yes, the fence, at its far end, had drifted approximately 1.8 degrees from parallel alignment. In practical terms, this meant that over a 40-foot fence, one end was about 2.5 inches out of line with the property boundary. The HOA sent Marcus a letter. The fence was non-compliant. He had 60 days to remove and rebuild it at his own expense. Marcus called the contractor. The contractor pointed out that the original approved diagram, the one the HOA had signed off on, had shown the fence in exactly the position it was built. If there was a discrepancy, the HOA had approved a non-compliant design. The HOA said that didn't matter. The physical fence didn't meet the standard. Down it comes. Marcus, still being calm, decided to hire a licensed land surveyor to come out and do a full property survey before making any decisions. The surveyor came, did his work, produced a detailed report. And then the surveyor pulled Marcus aside and said quietly, "I think you should see something." The reveal. Pam's fence, the fence she had installed 8 years earlier. The fence that was just sitting there minding its business on the other side of the yard was not on the property line. It was 6 inches over the property line, onto Marcus's land. Surveyor's report was a public document. It had to be filed with the county. There was nothing quiet about this finding. Marcus did not confront Pam. He didn't need to. He filed the survey report with the county recorder's office as required. He informed his HOA of the finding. He mentioned politely that he would not be tearing down his fence and that he was prepared to let a court sort things out. He never had to get to court. Within 2 weeks, Pam quietly had her fence removed. No explanation, no conversation. It just came down one afternoon while she was at work. The HOA dropped their complaint against Marcus. Marcus's kids now play in the backyard every single day. His youngest calls the fence the magic wall because every time she runs up to it, she's safe. Pam has not made eye contact with Marcus since. Here is a sentence I genuinely never expected to have to say. A woman was reported to her HOA because her garden was too beautiful. Rachel is a landscape designer by profession. She spends her working hours creating outdoor spaces for other people. So when she bought her own home, she had very specific ideas about what she wanted to do with her front yard. Over 2 years, she transformed it. She ripped out the existing lawn, the standard issue grass that every house on the street had, and replaced it with a native plant garden. Pacific Northwest wildflowers, ferns, ornamental grasses, a small curved stone path through the middle, raised beds edged with reclaimed wood. The garden attracted pollinators, bees, butterflies, hummingbirds. Rachel had documented over 30 species visiting the yard. Neighbors would slow their cars down when they drove past. People on walks would stop to look. Kids in the neighborhood called it the fairy garden. Rachel was proud of it. Her whole professional life had led to this. Gloria had a problem with it. Gloria was the HOA board's landscape and aesthetic standards coordinator, a real title in this case, not one she made up, and she filed a formal complaint 3 months after the garden was completed. The complaint cited 2 concerns. First, the garden was non-standard and deviated from the neighborhood's established aesthetic. Second, the garden was drawing unwanted foot traffic from non-residents who stopped to look at it. The proposed remedy? Rachel should remove the native plant garden and restore the lawn to standard grass. Rachel went to the HOA meeting. She brought photographs of every other front yard in the neighborhood, including Gloria's, and pointed out that the rulebook defined standard as maintained and well-kept, not as specifically grassed. Her garden was meticulously maintained. The board said it was still their call to make, and they wanted grass. Rachel went home and made some calls. She contacted a local native plant conservation nonprofit she had worked with professionally. The nonprofit's director, a woman who had been fighting exactly these kinds of HOA battles for 15 years, told Rachel something she hadn't known. Washington State had passed an ordinance, the Washington Native Plant Lawn Conversion Law, that specifically protected homeowners. right to replace traditional lawns with drought-tolerant or native plant landscaping. HOAs could not require removal of compliant native plant gardens. Furthermore, Rachel's garden qualified for a City of Seattle Green Yard Recognition Program, which included a small beautification grant. The ceremony. Rachel applied. She was approved. The city sent a representative to her house with a small plaque for her yard and a formal letter of recognition. She invited the HOA board to attend. 3 of the 5 members showed up. Gloria was one of them. Gloria stood in the back. She did not speak. She left before the refreshments were served. The garden still stands today. Rachel added a second stone path last spring. She got a letter from a local elementary school asking if they could bring a class to see the pollinators. She said, "Yes, obviously. I need to prepare you for this one." This is the story that, when I first read it, made me put my phone down and just sit quietly for a moment. Not because it ends badly. It doesn't. It ends incredibly well. But the beginning of this story is going to make you genuinely angry at a stranger. Which is fine. You're allowed. You're encouraged, honestly. Lily was 8 years old. She had just finished watching a documentary at school about animal shelters, specifically about the fact that many shelters struggle with funding, and that animals sometimes don't get the care they need because of it. Lily decided she wanted to help. She asked her mom if she could set up a lemonade stand to raise money for their local shelter. Her mom said yes. They made a poster together. They made 3 pitchers of lemonade. They set up a folding table on the sidewalk in front of their house on a Saturday morning. Lily charged $1 per cup and wrote "All money goes to animals" on the poster in red crayon. Her mom posted a photo of Lily and the stand in the neighborhood Facebook group with a caption about what she was raising money for. The post had 47 likes within an hour. The 48th response was not a like. Carol, HOA board member, self-described community standards advocate, commented publicly on the post that the lemonade stand constituted commercial activity in violation of Section 7.4 of the HOA's community guidelines and that it needed to be shut down immediately. Then Carol closed her laptop, got up, walked down the street, and said this directly to an 8-year-old girl. Lily cried. She started packing up her poster. Lily's mom, who had been inside briefly, came out to find her daughter in tears and a neighbor walking back down the street. When she understood what had happened, she did what any parent in 2024 does in this situation. She posted about it. In detail, with Carol's comments screenshotted. The neighborhood Facebook post got shared to a Denver local community group, then to a national neighborhood news page. Then someone posted it on X, where it got picked up by several accounts with large followings. By early afternoon, the story was being covered by 2 Denver local TV news stations. A reporter showed up on the street with a camera, and the neighborhood showed up too. Not just neighbors, strangers, people who had seen the story online, who lived in other parts of Denver, who had driven over specifically to buy a cup of lemonade from Lily. By 3 p.m., there was a line stretching down the sidewalk. Several local businesses sent representatives. A pizza place nearby sent a delivery person with free pizza for the volunteers. A florist brought flowers. Lily's original fundraising goal had been $100, the number. By the end of the day, Lily had raised $3,400 for the animal shelter, 34 times her original goal. Carol resigned from the HOA board within 48 hours, posting a brief statement about stepping back to focus on personal priorities. The HOA board issued a formal written apology to Lily's family and amended their community guidelines to explicitly permit non-commercial charitable activities by minors. The animal shelter sent Lily a handwritten thank you card signed by the staff. They included a photo of a dog named Biscuit, who would be receiving care because of her donation. Lily has the photo on her bedroom wall. Carol's comment is still in the screenshot. The internet does not forget. Every story in this video has been satisfying. Every story has ended with justice. But this one is different. This one made people angry in a way that went beyond neighborhood drama. This one became national news. This one is the reason I saved it for last. Robert is 68 years old. He is a retired United States Army veteran, 2 tours overseas, 22 years of service, an honorable discharge, and a chest full of medals he keeps in a box in his bedroom closet because he says he's not the kind of man who puts things like that on display. The one thing he does display is his flag. For 22 years in that house, Robert has flown an American flag from a pole he installed himself in his front yard. He flies it every day. He raises it in the morning. He brings it in at dusk or leaves it illuminated at night following proper flag code. He replaces the flag when it gets worn. The flag is not a decoration to Robert. It is not an aesthetic choice. It is, as he told the journalist who eventually covered his story, a conversation between me and everybody I served with who didn't make it home. Brenda moved into the neighborhood 3 years ago and ran for HOA president on a platform of what she called comprehensive standards enforcement. She won in the way HOA presidents usually win. The previous president was tired. Nobody else ran, and Brenda got 11 votes. Her first year was relatively quiet. Her second year, she began working through what she called a property compliance audit, reviewing every home in the neighborhood against the full HOA rulebook. She got to Robert's house. She looked at the flagpole. She measured it. The pole was 3 inches taller than the maximum flagpole height allowed under the HOA's architectural guidelines. Brenda sent a letter. The pole needed to come down or be replaced with one of compliant height within 30 days. Robert sent a letter back. It said essentially, no. Brenda escalated. The HOA began fining Robert $50 a day. Robert did not pay. He did not move the flag. He did not respond to further letters. After 60 days, Brenda brought it to the full board. She argued that Robert's continued non-compliance was a breach of his HOA contract and that the association should pursue a lien against his property, a legal claim against the home itself to force compliance. The board voted 3-2 in favor of pursuing it. Robert's daughter, who lived 2 states away, called him that night. He told her what was happening. She asked if she could post about it online. He said he didn't care. She posted. The response was immediate and overwhelming. National veterans organizations shared the story. Military spouse groups shared it. News desks started calling. A congressman's office reached out. Within 24 hours, the story was on 3 national news networks. The law. Here is what Brenda did not know. Here is what she had clearly never looked up, never been told, never thought to research before she decided to go after a 68-year-old Army veteran's flagpole. The Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005 is a federal law, passed unanimously by Congress, signed by President George W. Bush, that explicitly prohibits any homeowners association, condominium association, or cooperative from restricting the display of the American flag on a member's property, not limiting it, not regulating the pole height, not fining for it, prohibiting the restriction entirely. Federal law. Above any HOA document, non-negotiable. Robert's attorney, who took the case pro bono within hours of the story going viral, sent a single letter to the HOA. The letter cited the statute, noted that every fine issued was legally void, demanded immediate cessation of lien proceedings, and requested reimbursement of Robert's legal costs. The HOA's response came 4 days later, all fines voided, lien proceedings dropped, legal fees covered, written apology issued. At the next HOA meeting, which had significantly higher attendance than usual, Brenda was removed from the board by a vote of 47-1. The one vote in her favor was her own. The ending. Robert has not commented extensively on the public attention. He gave one brief interview to a local paper. He said, and I want to read this carefully because I think it's worth hearing. I didn't do any of this to make a point. I just wasn't going to take my flag down. That was never going to happen. And I think most Americans understand why. The flag is still flying. It will always be flying. Outro target. 2 minutes, 7 stories, 7 Karens. 7 homeowners who decided they weren't going to take it. And here's the thing that every single one of these stories has in common. That Karen thought she had all the power. She had the rule book. She had the title. She had the clipboard and the measuring tape and the laminated card in her purse. But what every single one of these homeowners discovered, when they slowed down, read the fine print, asked the right questions, and stood their ground, was that the Karen had never actually read the whole rule book. She had never looked up the law. She had never anticipated that someone would push back. Know your rights. Know the exact wording of the rules. Know what your state law says, and document everything. Because more often than not, the person trying to fine you for the color of your garden hose hasn't read past page 4. Now, I know that a lot of you watching this have your own HOA Karen story. I know because when I put out a call for submissions, I received over 400 responses in 3 days. 400. We could do a part 2. Honestly, at this rate, we could do a series. Drop your story in the comments. If I use it in a future video, I'll credit you or keep you anonymous, whatever you prefer. Because these stories deserve to be heard. If this video made your blood boil even once, and I know it did, hit the like button. It genuinely helps more people find these stories. Subscribe if you want to be here for part 2. Trust me, you do. Stay strong. Know your bylaws. Keep your receipts. And if Karen shows up on your porch with a measuring tape at 6 a.m. in her bathrobe,